Hello everybody, it is your Peacekeeper coming at you with we're going to restart the US battleship tree, and the reason why I'm doing this is because the old videos are kind of outdated and really not as interesting to watch, and they're just not up to the quality of the channel. So we're going to redo them, and we are going to start off by talking about the Tier 3 USS South Carolina and the South Carolina class of battleships. These ships are notable because they are the first American dreadnoughts ever produced. There were two ships in the class, the USS South Carolina and the USS Michigan, and their most defining feature are these super firing turrets. Now, if you're not familiar with what the term super firing refers to, it has to do with these middle two turrets being able to shoot over the foremost and aftmost turrets. And that gave them quite a lot of capability. They could always fire 4 guns going forward or 4 guns going back, or they could always turn and get all 8 guns to bear with a broadside salvo. That led to a lot of comparisons to the HMS Dreadnought, of course, the, predecessor and creator of the entire classes of ships that would become what we know today as battleships. In terms of their design, due to a congressionally placed limit on displacement and size, the people designing the ship had to prioritize armor over speed, and thus these ships are incredibly slow. This meant that their utility in combat was extremely low because they were always slower than the surrounding ships supporting them. They were even slower than the U.S. standards, which by the time this ship rolled around were already well into their production. So, with that in mind, it was kind of a little bit of a faux pas that these ships actually entered service at all. In terms of actual combat, neither the USS Michigan or the USS South Carolina saw any actual combat during World War I. Before the U.S. entrance into World War I, they remained near home waters on neutrality patrols. And once the U.S. entered World War I, they spent their time escorting convoys across the Atlantic, and, well, they both suffered from problems in doing so. Both ships lost a propeller during the crossings. The USS South Carolina lost her starboard propeller on her way home, and the USS Michigan lost her port propeller also on her way home not more than a month later. And thankfully, both of them were able to get home. The USS South Carolina did suffer from some other problems on that return trip home while only crawling home on one screw, involving the valves that controlled the pressure to the turbines. And, well, needless to say, these ships were not exactly the most reliable ships either. Also, the USS Michigan is the only one of these two to actually suffer any casualties as a result of their actions in World War I. On her way, while escorting a convoy, the front cage mast collapsed and killed 6 and injured 13 people. So not exactly a stellar performance record for the United States' first dreadnought. However, her in-game performance is significantly different. But before we talk about that in-game performance, there's some things I want to talk about first. First and foremost, the United States battleships are not the most forgiving line of battleships in the game. At this point, as of November 21st, 2016, that still goes to the German line of battleships. However, I will caution you, if you are new to battleship gameplay, the German battleships will cause you to develop what I would call bad habits. Habits that you can pick up that will punish you in other battleships. The Japanese line, while very good and very versatile all the way through the line, with just a couple of rough patches, is, I would say, kind of more the finesse line. It requires a different play style. The nice part about the U.S. battleships is they do offer good skills that you can develop that will transition very well into both the German and Japanese battleship line. So with that, I do recommend the U.S. battleships as being the starting point. With that, there are 3 things you need to know to have the most success in U.S. battleships. Number 1 is pre-planning and map knowledge. The U.S. battleships, all the way up until Tier 7, well, I guess including Tier 7, have a 21 knot speed or slower top speed. Once we get into the Wyoming to the Colorado, the Tier 4 to the Tier 7, you get 21 knots as your max speed. The South Carolina is basically 19 knots. With that, you do not have the ability to flex across the map like the Japanese or German battleships do. You basically are going to have to know your maps well enough to know where enemies are going to be at and to put yourself in the most favorable map position in order to maximize your capabilities. This will get driven home, Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5, Tier 6, Tier 7. By the time you hit Tier 8 and get the North Carolina, that speed change is going to be a massive change in gameplay for you. And it's going to allow you a little bit of extra flexibility, but ultimately it's going to make you a much better player because you're going to learn the maps much better. You're going to know where the enemies are going to be at. You also need to have the confidence in your gameplay style to actually play in this style because you're going to a point and, well, once you get there, you're going to have to fight because you can't run. Once you get into a fight, these ships lack the speed to get away from it. So once you're there, you're there. You are kind of an anchor, an immovable object that helps move your team forward. So if you see your team all of a sudden ducking to the other side of the map, well, if you can follow them and there's enough time to do it, you should probably do that because you do not want to be alone in these ships. They're quite capable in the right hands, but trust me, you're better off being with your fleet than you are without it. The second skill that you really need to be aware of is situational awareness. And no, I'm not talking about the old 1-point captain skill, or I believe it was a 4-point before that captain skill, that tells you when you're detected or not. What I'm talking about is when you are not shooting your guns or actively aiming them at something, you need to have your head out of the binoculars. If you're new to this game and haven't figured out the control scheme or not really well comfortable with it, you can use your right mouse button as a way to look around the ship without turning your guns. And you'll see that a lot in the battle video. You'll see that when I'm not aiming, I am constantly got my head out of the binoculars. You do not want to be in binocular vision for the entire time. You also need to be looking 360 degrees around you because, well, your ship is slow enough that destroyers can get behind you. And that's especially true if you've decided to disengage from a point to get back or closer to your friendlies because they've abandoned you for some reason. Just keep in mind you need to have a 360-degree situational awareness of what's going on around you. You need to be angled to battleships if you can, and that goes right into the third point. The U.S. battleships are not forgiving of playing broadside to enemy battleships. It is absolutely the worst tactic you could possibly take with these ships. Because of the all-or-nothing armor scheme, which, well, let's talk about that. The USS South Carolina is the only U.S. battleship that does not have an all-or-nothing armor scheme. You can see she has an armor belt here that extends all the way to the very tip of the bow. That's 38 millimeters. If we step up to the Arkansas or to the Wyoming, you can see that this ends. This is the Wyoming. You can see that the armor belt, which you can't see because of the torpedo bulges, ends right in front of the front magazines. We'll go to the Arkansas to show it a little bit closer. You can see how the belt ends before you get to the front bow. Because of this armor scheme, you absolutely positively have to be angled to incoming fire. If you are approaching an enemy battleship, you do not want to be completely nose on, although in later tiers that will become an advantage. You can see this huge area of blue here. That will accept enemy shells into it. This will not bounce shells at all. I mean, they would have to hit at very shallow angles or be cruiser AP to bounce. Most of your enemies at this tier are going to be shooting HE at you. Again, this is not going to do anything to stop damage from HE. This little section of armor belt down here is definitely not enough to protect you from enemy incoming AP fire. So in order to maximize the amount of protection and minimize the amount of damage that you're going to take, you want to angle yourself so that your line of travel presents this kind of profile to the enemies. This allows this massive section of armor belt here to be the predominant thing that they can hit. You've got a whole bunch of superstructure, but you've also got all of your vitals covered by armor belting. This is a tactic that is absolutely critical for the all-or-nothing armor scheme battleships that come after it. If you do not master the ability to angle your ship at Tier 3 and Tier 4, you will not enjoy playing Tier 5, 6, or 7, and you will definitely not enjoy the North Carolina, Iowa, or Montana, which take the extremes of the all-or-nothing armor scheme and punish you dearly with massive citadel sizes. So you need to learn to angle your ships early on. So again, we want to present this very narrow profile as we are approaching ships. And if we are leaving and running away from contact, we want to also be presenting a reasonably good profile so that most of the enemy AP shells are going to hit the belt of these ships. If you can memorize those 3 skills, pre-planning and knowing your map knowledge, knowing where you need to go on the map, situational awareness, having an idea of what's going on around you at all times, and being able to angle your armor, the gunnery skills will come as they do with any ship. They're really not as important because you know how to survive long enough to actually make use of the guns, which, by the way, all of the U.S. battleships have very punchy guns. They're really quite capable ships when played correctly. To the South Carolina specifically, as I already said, none of the U.S. battleships until you reach Tier 8 are what I would call fast, capping out at 21 knots. The USS South Carolina only goes 19 knots, and that is actually with the speed flag, now that I'm thinking about it. We'll get rid of the speed flag. 18 knots on the nose, okay? So you have an 18-knot top speed. But the upside is you are relatively maneuverable for a battleship. You have a very tight turning circle, and we'll cover that when we get to the stats. The gun angles are also very, very good. You can see the angle of these turrets here when they present a profile. You know, you don't have to be presenting a complete broadside, but when you're charging at enemy ships, you want to balance your gun angles so that, let's say that this tugboat here was the ship that we were shooting at. You can see that the front turrets would be able to engage, but the back turrets still have a ways to go before they can engage. This is actually the ideal angle at which we can approach ships because it maximizes that belt armor being presented. Because of the ship's maneuverability, you can actually wag the tail of the ship and bring the rear guns to bear, shoot, and then mask them again so that they're hidden while presenting that ideal profile. That is a tactic that you need to learn with this ship that will help you with all of the U.S. battleships, and it plays really well to all battleships in general. Alright, well, let's go ahead and talk about those stats since we're here. Hit points, 31,700. She's got a lot of armor. It's a battleship. What'd you expect? 12 inches of it, to be precise. All of that located along the belt. There's a section in the middle that's only 11 inches. She has a 21% torpedo damage reduction. That's about average. You're going to knock basically a fifth of all torpedo damage off just from hitting your torpedo bulge. She does have 8 12-inch guns, the main battery. They are in 2 turrets front, 2 turrets aft, 2 barrels per turret for a total of 4 front barrels, 4 rear barrels. They have a firing range of 11.2 kilometers. She also has a bunch of 76mm secondaries, 20 of them to be exact. This is actually 2 less than her launched complement, and there they are in the A-hole configuration. Those guns were predominantly to ward off destroyers. In this game, they have a very short firing range of 3 kilometers, and the accuracy is about that of a drunken sailor, so don't count on them. In terms of anti-aircraft, she does have it, although as a Tier 3 ship, your chances of seeing, well, you know, you'll see aircraft carriers, but not as often as you'd think. These ships do spend a healthy amount of time in Tier 2, Tier 3 fights, but they do get into Tier 4 fights where they can see Langley's and Hosho, I think is the Tier 4 Japanese. In that regard, it's not spectacular. In fact, you only have 4 of these 76mm guns with, 9 damage per second, which is like a 1% chance to shoot down an enemy aircraft. Maximum speed, 18 knots without the speed flag, just shy of 19, with 480 meter turning circle, and a rudder shift time of 10.7 seconds. That's the amount of time it requires to shift the rudder from that time, I believe, is from the midpoint to max. If it's not that, it's from full one direction to full the other direction. Her detection range by sea is 13.4 kilometers. That means other ships will see you at 13.4 kilometers. And her detection range by air, or by what aircraft can see, is 7.5 kilometers. Those are the stats. Let's talk about the upgrades. If we go over here to our upgrades, we have 2 slots. The first slot is going to always be Main Armaments Mod 1. There simply isn't another time that I would take any of these other modifications. Sure, I suppose if, you really wanted to build yourself an anti-aircraft barge for the upper tier ones, you might take this. But really, what Main Armament Mod 1 is for is it reduces the chances of your main battery getting incapacitated, it increases the amount of hit points that they have, and it reduces the time it takes to repair them should they actually get taken out. So that's really the key one for that, and that's going to be from Tier 3 all the way to Tier 10. In this slot, we have Damage Control Systems Mod 1, Propulsion Mod 1, and Steering Gears Mod 1. I'm going to push you guys to Damage Control Systems Mod 1, which reduces the chances of getting a flood and fire by 3 and 5% respectively. These other modifications reduce the chances of your engines or steering gears getting knocked out and then decreases the amount of time it takes to repair them. Of these two, only the steering gears really have a chance to get taken out easily, and that's usually with a torpedo hit to the back section of the ship. You usually have a repair party consumable up to take care of that. So these 2 modifications you'll never see me take on a battleship. You will see me take Propulsion Mod 1 on a destroyer, but not on a battleship. So Damage Control Systems Mod 1 is where it's at. I should also talk about Repair Party, Damage Control Party, and the Repair Party consumables. The Damage Control Party is going to take care of when all of your guns and stuff get incapacitated. Battleships get lit on fire all the time. They get floods all the time. They take module damage all the time. You're a sponge for damage. In fact, that's how you get and maximize the amount of XP and credits you get in the game, is by being in position to take damage. Not necessarily taking damage, but being in the position to take damage. And with that, I highly recommend that the only time you use your damage control party to take care of fires or floods, well, we'll start with fires. With fires, 2 or more fires. Do not burn one on one fire unless there is nothing else in range that can light you on fire for the time that damage control party is down. With floods, you want to repair floods almost immediately. Unless, of course, there's a second set of torpedoes coming or you're under a lot of HE fire. Flood damage does a lot of damage, but the nice part about both flood and fire damage is you can repair almost all of it, if not all of it. Fire, you can repair all of it for sure. With these repair parties, this is the ability to heal back hit points that you've lost. You will see in the battle interface the gray section on the ship icon with your hit points in it. That is how much you can repair back. Make sure that you have a fairly decent chunk of it available to repair back before you use the consumable. If you only have a tiny sliver, like say 1,000 or 2,000 hit points, it's kind of a waste. So make sure that you're using these 2 consumables wisely. The repair party consumable, the damage control party consumable is by far the most important one to know how to use. You'll see here that I'm running a premium one. You don't have to run premium, just make sure that you're only using it to repair 2 or more fires or floods when it's safe to do so. Alright, let's go ahead and let's go to the battle video. Alright, so remember my 3 points there that I was talking about. We need to have map awareness, and we need to know where we're going and which way to go to put ourselves into combat. We need to be situationally aware of our surroundings, and we also need to know how to properly angle ourselves against incoming fire. This battle is a Tier 3, Tier 4 fight. It is predominantly Tier 3 battleships, though. there is an Arkansas beta on the other team, which is basically a Wyoming A-hole configuration with the full Tier 10 slots for upgrade modules. It's kind of a fun ship to play around with, but it has no anti-aircraft capabilities at all. Okay, so this is... I can't remember what the name... Arpeggio, maybe? I think is the name of the map. And we have 2 cap points. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take myself and we're going to go defend our cap. And we're going to make good use of ourselves once we get there. I have a feeling that they're going to do the same, which helps me out because, well, this map is small enough that I can still shoot at them even if they're in their cap, and there's not a whole lot of avenues for their destroyers to really approach from, so that all helps out tremendously with how this game goes. Also, we get a dev strike in here on I think it was the Danae, I think it gets dev struck. And I'm sure that will show up again in another video here pretty soon. But you can see exactly how slow this ship really is, but you can also get a pretty good look at the gun angles there as well. You can see that we don't need to give ourselves too much of an open profile to bring all 8 of our guns to bear. That is a tremendous advantage, and as I said in the port video, all we really have to do is kind of waggle our tail and it gets us aimed where we need to be, and then we can mass those guns again and present a small enough profile to not take insane amounts of damage. We haven't spotted anything yet. We should be here spotting some stuff shortly. But we're going to continue to press on. We got ourselves in Nassau. We actually have quite a healthy fleet here going. We've got 2 destroyers. It looks like at least 2 cruisers. At least 2 battleships, if not more. No idea what the Nassau is shooting at. Long-range gunnery is not a strong suit for the Nassau, so if you're one of those players, I do have a how to play video on that. Alright, we can start to see some of their ships now. Looks like we've got a couple of their heavies coming towards us from the northwest, while the rest of their fleet goes and hangs around their cap. That's good to know. It'd be nice to see those ships and be able to actually plan our engagement on them. Nothing's in range yet, and even if it was, it probably wouldn't be terribly accurate. Got ourselves a little bit of a battle line coming in here, which is kind of nice. One other tip that I can give you guys that will really help you... Oh, it was a Caledon that I dev strike. One other tip that I can really give you guys to help you guys out is... if you think an enemy is coming from a location and your guns are turned the opposite way, you probably should turn them as soon as possible. For instance, in this case, I'm going to ignore all of their ships that are in their cap and focus on the ships that are pressing into our cap, because that is the pressing issue. To do that, you need to turn those turrets as early as possible. That just helps you get them all on target sooner, without all of the headaches and issues associated with it otherwise. Also, U.S. battleships, the aiming point for U.S. battleships, if you can get it, is going to be at the waterline and, amidship. Now you can see there that I was slightly halfway up on his ship, and that's precisely because he was turning away. Well, it didn't help him out any. From nearly full health to nothing in one salvo. Got him is exactly right. Now, we've got this Isakaze here coming up. We're going to select it with our secondaries, but they're so short range, it's really not going to matter. And because of his position, we're going to... Well, we're going to pivot our turrets. Like I said before, our goal here is to get our turrets all turned to that side as soon as we possibly can to address him. I'm going to let my team know that I'm going to need their help with this DD on the side. And I'm hoping that Mr. Berju, I think was his name. Hopefully he can turn around and come assist. So much I hope so, because, well, destroyers are bad for battleships. Okay? If you happen to see a destroyer coming at you, don't panic. If it's too close for you to turn broadside and get away, like if they're coming at you and they're launching torps, the best thing to do is actually to turn into them It presents a smaller profile for their torpedoes to hit, and it also allows you a little bit more flexibility to dodge any torpedoes that do come your way. Good, he came back to help. Now, don't think that just because he's a destroyer, you can't smack him too, because, well, if your aim is true... Yeah, I'll take 6,000 damage off of destroyer's health. One salvo, 6,000 hit points. Yup. So your guns aren't completely useless on these, especially not up against destroyers. Alright, the destroyer threat's gone. Now we can turn and address other issues and other threats. You can see just how maneuverable the ship is, owing largely to its short profile. But again, we've got our guns to bear, and we're going to continue to use them. Now, this South Carolina is coming directly at me, and you can see the little icon in the middle of the screen next to the crosshair that looks like a mountain. Well, that's because the mountain is in the way. Go ahead and take our shot. We only take 3,200 hit points off him. That's because they were all overpens, but it helps out enough to get the kill for our Wicks. He was able to get the torpedo hits off. We're going to continue our turning here, and we are going to turn. We're going to make a left-hand turn to loop around. We're going to engage this Nassau as we go, and you can see how these gun angles allow you to present a very small profile while also bringing all of your guns to bear. Well, I'm still turning, almost full over, but... And 7,000 hit points, almost 7,000 hit points there, off of the Nassau. We're going to go ahead and keep pushing him here, but he's going to end up dying, and we are going to turn ourselves completely around. Yep, those torps are going to kill him. Might as well turn ourselves completely around. Not even waste the salvo. Not necessary to waste it. And once again, when you're turning these circles around, the difficulty is in determining which direction you're going to go once you've turned yourself around. If you're going to continue to go, for instance, straight east on the map to the right of the map, or straight ahead from where I'm at this point, I would want to pivot my guns to the other side. But because I'm planning on going north towards their cap, I want to keep my guns on the right side. And so the way to do that is you'll point your guns to the right side, and then you use the right mouse button to look around. And you can see that I'm looking around all the time. Well, in this case, I'm looking basically straight ahead, but when I'm getting into the combat situation and I know that there's ships around that I need to pay attention to, I'm constantly looking around. And of course, when you start typing, you have to let go of that right mouse button, but there we go. Now we're back. We got ourselves an Arkansas Beta, which is, again, basically an A-hole Wyoming. It is a Tier 4 battleship. It has 12 guns on it. 12 12-inch guns on it. Very difficult nut to crack. Very difficult ship to play against, especially if it's played by a competent captain. However, we have superiority of numbers. He's coming down the pike here with very little, and his aim is off. He was expecting me to go faster than I was. Don't worry, I was expecting me to go faster too. We're going to go ahead and return salvo. 2,700 damage. Better than a poke with a sharp stick, I suppose. You can see he's also starting to angle himself and change his profile, but you can also see where his guns are rotating to not me. Also, we got a Kuma. Kuma and Tenryu are both very, very soft cruisers. If you happen to catch them broadside like I did there, punish them. Take every advantage you can. And double Citadel for 16,000 damage. You can see just how soft those ships are. It was either that or shoot at the Arkansas Beta for probably 6k. I think I'll take the double Citadel on almost killing the Kuma completely. You can see I had 2 fires there. We're going to go ahead and whisk them away. What's shooting at me with HE is few and far between. Got ourselves angled a little bit, and, well, we took some fire from that other South Carolina back there that really hurt. But the Arkansas Beta's fire, most of it bounced off of me. We're going to take this opportunity while he's reloading to go ahead and turn. As you can see there, it was 5,500 damage, so I wasn't too far off in the amount of damage that I was going to do. We're going to take this advantage to turn all the way around. That Arkansas is dead. Those torpedoes are going to smoke him. And I'm not going to worry about him. And there's another 7K from that other South Carolina. So we're going to shoot at him now. Look at his angle relative to the crosshairs there. You can see the direction that the whole of his ship was going. And 5,400. And we're going to turn all the way around and out. And pivot our guns as well. Unfortunately, this maneuver is going to take us out of the fight permanently. However, you know, you have concessions that you have to make, and in this case it was either that or beach, and this ship does not turn around quick enough to survive beaching, so we're going to go ahead and we're just going to keep moving forward. We're going to turn around and take ourselves out of this fight for the most part until we can get ourselves around again. That'll also give us the opportunity to repair. You can see the health bar in the lower left hand corner. You can see how it's orange, and then there's a section of gray, and then the rest is like a really dark gray. That lighter section of gray is how many hit points you can repair with the repair party. We got a Wix, a Dene, and a South Carolina is what's left. 62,789 damage in this game. That is basically 4 times the server average. Not to brag or anything. This is a pretty good game. No complaints at all. You can see our Wix there getting very aggressive with that South Carolina, and I don't think he anticipated that that Wix popping out there. And Dene, we ever going to get in range? Nope, he's going to start turning out and away, so he's going to be out of range before I can shoot at him. The Wix takes care of that South Carolina. That leaves pretty much their Wix as the only target that's really left to engage. And he, too, is out of range and behind a mountain. So like I said, this takes us really out of play. But the U.S. battleships, you can see how that map, situational awareness, and the angling all played a key role. Now, obviously, the angling didn't work out terribly well when that South Carolina was taking 6K off of me. But, you know, that's part of the problem with these ships is the lack of armor on them, just in general. Oh, Wix is coming back. Let's see if we can't take some hit points off of him. I'm confident enough in my ability to actually shoot at him. Yeah, 4 hits for... I don't know how much damage that was, but... Anyway, it's quite a fun ship to play. 66,029 damage. You can see at the top with 1203 for base XP. You can see the damage there. Pretty much all of it done in armor-piercing shell hits. And there's the credit screen. Anyway... This is the first of many remake videos for the U.S. Battleship line. Go ahead and let me know what you guys think of the video down in the comments section. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks, guys, for watching. I appreciate it.